specialist in Central Africa and a professor of international politics at SOAS. He joins us now live from London. Thanks so much for being with us. I mean, it seems wise enough in principle, but can it work? Can these former warlords be trusted to do this kind of peacemaking?
This is a very risky strategy, Andrea. There's no doubt that these former rebel leaders know the conflict situation in this part of Congo because, of course, they were so heavily embroiled in it. They have very close networks in that part of the country. They understand the reasons why conflict has come to Ituri province over the last 15 or 16 years. But the big question here is how will they be received by the local communities that are currently involved in this conflict? Will they be seen as actors who have learned the rules of peace, or will they simply be seen as former combatants who are coming back to the places where they committed massive crimes? All of this hinges on how these particular rebel leaders are received by those local communities.
Right, because not only do they have to be trusted to not work solely in the interests of the parties that they fought for prior to being arrested, but they also do have to gain the trust of the local communities, and they have to be convinced that they have been rehabilitated. Do you think that they have been rehabilitated, that they have seen the wrongs of their ways and the devastation of the conflict that they perpetuated?
The truth is we simply don't know whether Germain Katanga and Mathieu Ngudjolo, the two rebel leaders in question, have been rehabilitated. There have been very few interviews with these individuals since they were both prosecuted by the International Criminal Court and since they've come back to Congo. We simply don't know their state of mind. One of the real challenges here, too, is that they don't simply have to be accepted by their old community. Both of these rebel leaders are from the Lendu ethnic group, but if they are to play any significant role in the peace process, they will also need to be accepted by the Hema, who are the other ethnic group, the group against which they had committed many atrocities in the past. And so they're going to have to be able to gain the confidence of both sides of this conflict, and that is going to be an enormous challenge for Katanga and Ngudjolo.
Right. It's also going to be very tough, I imagine, to really monitor and scrutinize the work they're doing on the ground. But let me ask you this as well. I mean, will the United Nations and the ICC have to then offer some sort of amnesty to the warlords that they're trying to convince to put down their arms now? And what would civilians think of that? I mean, in that case, they might not get the justice that they believe they deserve.
One of the really complicated issues with sending Katanga and Ngudjolo to Ituri is that Katanga has already been convicted by the ICC. So he's just come out of jail. He's very much seen as a convict of this conflict. On the other hand, Ngudjolo, who was accused of very similar atrocities to Katanga, he was acquitted by the International Criminal Court. So he came back to Congo, and many of the victims of Katanga and Ngudjolo's rebel movement were very angry that Ngudjolo never saw justice, that he ultimately was not convicted of those crimes. And so in the eyes of many local communities, he has received an effective amnesty. There's a lot of anger, especially amongst the Hema population in Ituri, that Ngudjolo has never really faced full accountability for what he did. My guess is that he's going to confront a lot of anger, especially within the Hema community when he goes back to Ituri. And if he's not adept, if he's not agile enough to be able to convince the Hema community that he now is an actor for peace, having previously been a warlord, then ultimately this new peace process is going to falter.
Philip, I mean, do you have some examples of where this has actually worked before? I remember a level of it was tried with the ELN in Colombia, for example, and some former FARC members. But has it been effective before to the point that you think it could work in the context of Central Africa?
We do have some examples from northern Uganda, very similar situation. A civil war that had raged for 20 years or more. Many of the senior commanders of the Lord's Resistance Army rebel group have been rehabilitated. They've received amnesties. They've come back to their home communities, and they have become involved in peace processes. But I think the key is that it took those northern Ugandan leaders a very, very long time to gain the trust of local communities. It was by no means something that happened overnight. And my guess is that this situation with Katanga and Ngujolo in Congo could work, but we shouldn't expect this to be a fast process, and it certainly can't be high profile. These former rebel leaders are going to need time to have very quiet, behind closed doors conversations with local communities to convince them that they are now reasonable actors for peace and to gain the trust of those local communities. If this is too high profile, if the Congolese government is trying to gain political mileage out of this, if the international press starts to interfere in that process on the ground in Ituri, it's going to be very difficult for these former rebel leaders to gain the community's confidence that they need for the peace process to ultimately be successful.
Phil Clark, great to have you again. Thanks so much for joining us.